Today I'm reviewing Amistad, directed by Steven Spielberg, and this is a really interesting one, because it's not a bad movie. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's a very well-made movie. It looks great, it has strong cinematography, it has powerful subject matter, and an incredible cast, and there are some moments where you can absolutely see the craftsmanship of one of the greatest directors of all time. But, even with all that said, I still think it's one of Spielberg's weaker films. And the biggest reason is that this movie feels like it's trying so hard to be important that it sometimes forgets to fully work as a movie. The story itself is obviously powerful. The film was based on the real-life 1839 revolt aboard the slave ship La Amistad, where enslaved Africans took control of the ship and were later put on trial in the United States. That is already an intense, emotional, historically important story, and on paper that sounds like exactly the kind of material Spielberg could turn into something unforgettable. And visually, he does bring a lot of weight to it. The movie has that very polished, prestige drama look. The lighting, the framing, the costumes, the courtroom scenes, the ship sequences, everything looks expensive and carefully composed. This is not a lazy movie. Spielberg clearly knows how to make the material feel great and cinematic. But the problem is, the movie often feels like it is chasing greatness instead of naturally being great. That's where the comparison to Schindler's List becomes unavoidable. Schindler's List felt like a story Spielberg was passionate about telling. You can feel that passion in every frame. It's horrifying, heartbreaking, strange when it needs to be, and emotionally devastating without feeling manipulative. It just happens to be an Oscar-winning masterpiece because the storytelling is that strong. Amistad, on the other hand, feels like Spielberg trying to catch lightning in a bottle twice. It has the idea of, okay, I made a gritty historical drama about one of humanity's darkest chapters, it won Best Picture, so maybe if I do another serious historical courtroom drama, it'll happen again. And I don't think the movie is cynical or fake, for lack of a better word, but it does feel very calculated. It feels like a movie built to be respected more than experienced, and that's where the film starts to lose me. The emotional core should be Djimon Hounsou, and to the movie's credit, he gives a very strong performance. He brings pain, anger, dignity, confusion straight to the role. When the film actually focuses on him and the enslaved Africans, it becomes much more compelling. Those are the moments where the movie feels alive. You feel the horror of what they went through and the injustice of their situation, and the cruelty of being treated like property in a courtroom. But the movie keeps shifting its focus away from them and toward the legal process, the political maneuvering, and the white lawyers arguing over their humanity. Now, obviously, the court case is part of the real story, so I understand why that has to be included, but dramatically it creates this distance between the audience and the people we should be most connected to, and that is probably my biggest frustration with the film. For a movie about enslaved Africans fighting for their freedom, the film spends a lot of time making the lawyers the center of the story. But that brings me to Matthew McConaughey, and honestly, I think he is one of the best parts of the movie. This is one of his strongest early dramatic roles. He plays the attorney who helped defend the Africans, and he brings a lot of sincerity and conviction to the role. McConaughey has always had natural charisma, but here he tones it down and gives a more grounded performance. He doesn't feel like he's trying to steal the movie. He feels like a young lawyer gradually realizing the moral weight of what he's involved in, and I actually think his performance works better than the movie around him sometimes. He gives the story a clear human entry point, and he does a good job showing the shift from legal strategy to genuine moral responsibility. But then you have actors like Morgan Freeman and Anthony Hopkins, and this is where I feel the movie wastes some incredible talent. Morgan Freeman is one of the greatest screen presences ever, and in this movie he's good because he's Morgan Freeman. He brings dignity and intelligence to every scene he's in, but his character feels underused. He's there, he matters thematically, and he has strong moments, but the movie never gives him as much depth or purpose as it should. Anthony Hopkins has a bigger showcase later in the film as John Quincy Adams, especially during the Supreme Court section. And yes, Hopkins gives the kind of grand theatrical performance you expect from him. He has the big speeches, the prestige drama moments, he gets to deliver the kind of dialogue that sounds designed for award shows, but that is also part of the problem. By the time Hopkins becomes more central, the movie already feels like it should be ending. Around the almost 2 hour mark, it feels like the story's reached a natural conclusion. The court case has been decided, the major emotional legal beats seem to have landed, and you start thinking, okay, the film is wrapping up. But then the movie says, actually, now we're going to the Supreme Court, and it keeps going for almost another hour. And I understand that historically that's what happened. The case did go further. John Quincy Adams did become involved. The Supreme Court decision matters. I'm not saying that part of the story is unimportant, but as a movie, the pacing takes a hit. It starts to feel like the film has already reached its peak, but then it has to build itself back up for a second time. That can work if the momentum is strong enough, but here it feels stretched. Instead of feeling like an escalation, it feels more like an extension. The movie keeps telling you this is important, And it is important, but importance alone does not automatically create strong pacing. And that's really the central issue with the film. It's a movie full of important ingredients, but the final result feels too heavy, too long, and too self-conscious. There are moments where Spielberg's direction absolutely works. The flashbacks to the slave ship are brutal and disturbing, as they should be. The film does not shy away from the horror of the transatlantic slave trade, and those sequences are easily some of the most powerful parts of the movie. Spielberg knows how to show human suffering in a way that is visually unforgettable. But even then, some parts of the film feel like they are pushing so hard for emotional devastation that it becomes noticeable. With Schindler's List, the thing felt organic to the story. With Amistad, there are moments where I can feel the movie reaching that same level of historical weight, which makes it less effective. It's kind of strange, because this is a movie about an incredibly important subject, but the filmmaking sometimes creates a wall between the audience and the emotion. It's so polished and prestige-heavy, and so focused on being a serious historical epic, that it occasionally feels more like an Oscar campaign than a fully engaging drama. Again, I don't want to make it sound like the film was bad, because it's not bad. Any director probably could have made the story feel flat, cheap, or overly simplistic, and Spielberg does avoid that. There is real craft here. There are powerful performances. There are scenes that absolutely work. And the subject matter alone makes it worth watching, especially for people interested in historical dramas. But compared to Spielberg's best work, this feels like one of his more uneven efforts. Spielberg is at his best when emotion, character, and spectacle all come together naturally. Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, those movies have momentum. They have identity. They know exactly what they are. Even when they're serious, they feel alive. Amistad feels more like Spielberg trying to make an important Spielberg movie, and that difference matters. The movie has a strong lead performance from Djimon Hounsou, a very good dramatic turn from Matthew McConaughey, and some powerful historical sequences. But Morgan Freeman feels underused. Anthony Hopkins arrives almost like the movie is starting a new chapter after it already should have ended, and the pacing makes the whole thing feel longer than it needs to be. So overall, it's a well-made but flawed historical drama. It looks great, has strong performances, and tells a story that absolutely deserves to be remembered, but also feels like Spielberg is trying too hard to recreate the prestige and emotional forces of Schindler's List. And because of that, the movie ends up feeling more calculated than truly inspirational. For me, this is one of Spielberg's weaker films. Not terrible, not even close, but definitely not one of his strongest. So for me, it only gets a C, a 7 out of 10, and a 3 out of 5 stars.